The next female individual of the French Revolution that we'll be looking at is Germaine de Stael, and sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. She was born and given the name Anne-Louise Jerome Necker on the 22nd of April 1766. She was born in Paris, and she was actually the daughter of Necker, who was a financial minister to the King Louis XVI, who was married to Queen Marie Antoinette. She was raised in an intellectually rich environment. Her mother hosted intellectual salons that attracted Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau. Due to her higher status, she did have more access to education, and she was exceptionally well educated for a girl of her time. She studied literature, languages, philosophy, and politics, which shaped her lifelong intellectual passion. Her personality was said to be highly intellectual, talkative, and bold. In adulthood, she married the Swedish ambassador to France in 1786. However, this was more of a political marriage rather than a romantic one, in which several children were produced from the marriage. In Paris, she soon became influenced by the salons, and she became one of the most intellectual salon hosts in Paris, where she gathered political thinkers, writers, and exiles. Wrote a few philosophical works, such as De Fleuren of 1802, Coraline of 1807, and On Germany of 18. She promoted liberal values, individual freedom, and emotion in literature. However, she was soon exiled from France and did a bit of travelling. She was banished from Paris multiple times by Napoleon due to her outspoken criticism. She travelled through Europe, Germany, Italy, and Russia, meeting key figures like Guiteau and Chagall. She died in 1817 of a stroke in Paris. Left behind a legacy as a key figure in early Romanticism and liberal political thought. During the French Revolution, she had a sympathetic view to a constitutional monarchy and moderate reforms. Her role was used in a salon to influence the opinion and promote moderate political ideals. Her political stance was critical of both the Jacobins and Napoleon. She opposed tyranny in all forms. Her writing and advocacy wrote essays defending liberal and individual rights, including works like Reflections of the Trial of the Queen of 1793, defending Marie Antoinette. The revolution endangered her due to her aristocratic ties and political opinions. She fled France during the Reign of Terror and lived in exile in parts of the 1790s. The legacy that she left behind was considered one of the most brilliant women of her time, who helped bridge Enlightenment thinking with Romanticism, as well as a powerful voice in women and intellectual political life. The next individual of the French Revolution that we'll be looking at is Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France. Marie Antoinette was born on the 2nd of November 1755 in Austria as an Austrian archduchess. However, she was never really meant to marry the future Louis XVI. In fact, her sister was arranged to marry the future heir to the French throne. However, her sister died of smallpox in 1768, which meant that her sisters were all pushed in their marriages, which she married the heir to the French throne in May of 1770 and ascended the throne in 1774 upon the death of Louis XV. At this time, queens did not really have much political power, and Marie Antoinette she was not able to approve any reforms or have any reforms, but she did have the influence over fashion at the time, and also had some influence over her husband. A queen of her time, her role was to produce heirs. However, she took 7 years to consummate her marriage with Louis and produced her first child in 1778. As France was going through an economically turbulent time, with bread shortages and the cost of living increasing due to France's mass spending on things like the American War of Independence and the 7 Years' War, taxes were increasing and people were starting to place blame on the royal family, especially Marie Antoinette, who was blamed for her excessive spending on... Marie Antoinette was really a scapegoat for the economic issues of France, as Versailles had hosted thousands of people, and at some point in the 1770s, 30,000 people lived or occupied Versailles, and the spending of Versailles only accounted for less than 3% of the country's debt, which means placing an individual like Marie Antoinette, all the blame on her, was not really true in reality. In many instances that Marie Antoinette gave a lot to charities, she was aware of these poor harvests. For example, in 1784, she gave all of her allowance for the new year to her charities, as well as founding a home for unwed mothers. Given the context of her era, Marie Antoinette did fit the mold, and if you compare her to queens of her time, such as Queen Charlotte, she wasn't too indifferent from similar queens of her time. And if you compare her spending to the future, well, not future now, but Napoleon's wife Josephine, she spent 900,000 livres compared to Marie Antoinette's 200,000 livres per year. Some people justify Josephine's spending as Napoleon had France more economically stable, but I still don't think that you can justify spending so much when the country still is not being able to afford food. I don't think that the spending is justified in either situation, but I think if you look at the situation holistically and the system that these people were brought up in, they didn't really know any different. Especially with queens at that time not actually yielding any political power. So yes, Marie Antoinette was aware of what was happening in her country, but she herself could not actually have any political influence to change what was happening in the country. The events of the French Revolution unfolded from a wide century of events that occurred that unfortunately were placed on Louis XVI, and he potentially made some decisions that weren't the best. I do believe that if he was not involved in the American War of Independence, it could have helped to lower the cost of living and ease over tensions that rose in the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette was later executed on the 16th of October 1793 for allegedly treason against the country, incest, and hosting orgies of Versailles. Although her perception is mostly negative, I do believe that people today are starting to view Marie Antoinette in two lenses to be able to really see how she was in contrast to all the negative perceptions that were created of her during the French Revolution. I think that the roles of all these women in the French Revolution are extremely fascinating, and at a time that women did not have a voice, all these women managed to still try and spread their own voices and really push the way forward in modern feminism.